Alright, continuing on with Inner Work by Robert A. Johnson. This section is titled The Four-Step Approach to Active Imagination. In the next few chapters, I will present a four-step approach to active imagination that you can use to get yourself started. In this chapter, we will talk about the approach overall and also about the things you need to do to set the stage for active imagination. For example, you need to know where you will work. You need to establish some privacy, and you need to decide how you are going to record your active imagination. Here are the four steps. 1. Invite the unconscious. 2. Dialogue and experience. 3. Add the ethical element of values. And 4. Make it concrete with physical ritual. Dr. Maria Louise von Franz has shown that active imagination naturally falls into four basic stages. There's an asterisk here to the note. The four stages enumerated by Dr. von Franz are: first, empty the ego mind. Second, let the unconscious flow into the vacuum. Third, add the ethical element. And fourth, integrate the imagination back into daily life. This is from an unpublished lecture at the Panarian Conference in Los Angeles back in 1979. Different people will experience these stages in slightly different ways. I have tried with these four practical steps to formulate an orderly approach that will enable most people to find their way through the stages of active imagination without getting paralyzed or intimidated. Just as with dream work, it helps greatly to have a set procedure, a series of steps you can follow in an orderly way that will get you past the obstacles, confusion, and indecision that sometimes prevent people from getting started or following through. Choosing a physical mode for recording your imagination. Before we launch into the four steps, it's vital that you get the physical details of your method worked out. You need to set the physical stage and decide how you are going to record your active imagination. These details are more important than you might think. Many people give up on active imagination before they get started because they can't find a convenient way to record the imagination as it flows out. We have already talked about the importance of writing your inner work. This is even more true of active imagination. Your inner dialogue should be written or typed. This is your major protection. I'll say that again. This is your major protection against turning it into just another passive fantasy. The writing helps you to focus on what you're doing and not wander off into random daydreams. It enables you to record what is said and done so that you will remember and digest the experience afterwards. Writing is not the only mode of recording your active imagination. Later I will mention some other approaches, but for most people, writing is the easiest and most effective way. How to write. The two samples of active imagination I have given so far show a typical format for writing down the imagination. In the first sample, the woman used her notebook and wrote everything out by hand. She indicated who was speaking by an abbreviation in the margin. E stands for ego, meaning herself, and JA for the Japanese artist with whom she dialogued in her active imagination. I use the typewriter to record my own imagination. If you are proficient with the typewriter, it is very helpful. You can record your imagination rapidly, and you don't tire as quickly as you do if you write by hand. Nevertheless, many people prefer to write by hand, and this was the mode used by Carl Jung. Some people feel that the use of pen and ink feels more, quote, natural. They may even give their active imagination a ceremonial or archaic flavor by recording it with a fine calligraphy pen. My own method has worked well for many people who at first had difficulty getting started. I use the lowercase setting on the typewriter to type what I am saying. I use the shift lock, uppercase, all capitals, on the typewriter to record what the other person in my imagination says back to me. In this way, I don't have to indent or paragraph when there is a change of speaker. That was hard to say. I shift on the typewriter when I change speakers and I can move along as fast as my imagination flows. If the man whose mythic journey was the second example of active imagination had used my method, his active imagination would have looked like this. He just goes on into an excerpt from the previous example in another chapter about the man whose mythic journey was used, and it's just in a paragraph free flow. It has lowercase and then all uppercase to explain it. So I'm not sure if you're going to get much out of it by me reading it, but I'll go ahead and read it just so you get the gist. And maybe I'll try and put it on the camera, but I'm horrible at focusing it like that. Let's get started. Greetings from the man with the feathered cap, the Renaissance man who is teacher and guide. He greets me at the bridge. He has his staff. I have brought my lantern and a backpack. And that's in parentheses in regular sentence typeface. Then in all caps it says, "Greetings, I bring you good tidings. The weather is good for our journey tonight. We must begin right away, however, for things can change. We must begin right away, however, for things can change quickly in this world. Let us begin while we have the energy." And then in lowercase it says, "I am willing to begin this journey. I am willing to stick it through to its end. I begin in good faith that my actions will be sufficient to please the fates, and they will be kind to me." All caps. "Let us begin, then, and remember, even the smallest effort is of value. ... As you can see, the writer's words are in lowercase, and the words of the Renaissance man are in uppercase. Now let me see if I can show you this. Super blurry. This is why I don't do it. Alright. I hope that was worth your while. But I'm pretty sure you could have imagined what it looked like anyway. Moving forward. I read that part. If you use this method, you don't have to keep writing I or man in the margin to identify who's speaking, and you don't have to worry about indenting, paragraphing, or quotation marks. When you see the lowercase, you know that it is you speaking, and when you see the uppercase, it is the other person talking. In this way, you can just pour the dialogue and events onto the page as quickly as they happen and keep moving. There is no need to stop and make corrections. No one other than you will be reading it. If this format suits you, use it. If not, try the approach that was used in the earlier examples, or work a method out for yourself. The important thing is to have a simple, easy way to record what happens and what is said during the session of active imagination. If you have to struggle with quotation marks and sentence structure, punctuation, and spelling, you are already defeated before you start. It will feel too cumbersome and you won't continue. Adopt a method that is direct, simple, and works for you. And just a quick comment on that, I think that the free-flowing writing or typing is actually very easy for our generation, I would say, of people that are pretty comfortable with keyboard and typing really fast. I would recommend against using like a phone, because it's not a full keyboard, and it's also very impersonal. You have an item with, its own energies and frequencies coming into the mix. So I would probably, like it says, find a private space. Writing is very spiritually meditative and helps you focus, so that would be a good way. But then, like you said, you might have to do some abbreviation or try and keep up with the dialogue that's going on when you run out the active imagination to do this process. But if you've got a keyboard or a computer or laptop or something, maybe you could type a little faster, free-flowing. I know that when I do writing on my own and I try to relax my consciousness to do something like this, it flows very well on the keyboard. You just kind of let your hands relax into the point where I almost feel like a tingling, like someone else is taking over the keys, and it just relax and then free flow. And then when I start to think about it, then it's when I start to type gibberish. But then when I just relax and just type what comes to me, this does create a very significant flow and opens up the doorways or the passageways for your subconscious mind, which is still you, an aspect of yourself, which is in the depths of your unconscious, comes forth and is able to go into dialogue with you, which is what this is all about. Moving on, he tells other ways of registering active imagination. A few people work through their active imagination in special modes. They may express their inner imagery through dance, by playing music, drawing, painting, sculpting, or speaking the dialogue out loud. I once had a patient who was a dancer, and she could only express the events and dialogues in her imagination by dancing them. The first time she did that, it actually scared me speechless. She was acting out all the rawness, all the beauty, drama, struggle, and tragedy that went on in her inner life, all through her dance. She danced each character, acted out each role, portrayed animals, growled, grunted, shouted, fought, wept. By the time her session was over, I was crouched down, trying to hide in my chair. She said cheerfully, "Okay, Robert, you can come out now." After each session, she put into words for me what she had danced, what she had felt and seen in her imagination, and what it meant to her. This was helpful to me, since dance was for me a foreign language. Talking about it also helped her to make it more conscious. If you use one of these other modes, such as dancing or painting or playing in a sand tray, to act out the imagination or record it, it is still good to do some writing. Writing always helps to focus and make it conscious. For most people, writing is the best and most accessible form. The physical setting. Now that you've decided how you will record your imagination, you need to set up a room that is quiet and private enough that you can shut off the outside world for a while. You really cannot dialogue with your inner self if there are doorbells and telephones ringing every 5 minutes, children running through the room, dogs demanding to be fed or petted, and all of last month's unpaid bills sitting on the desk to distract you. You have to be assertive enough to set aside a room and a block of time for yourself. Tell everyone in the house that you are not to be disturbed except for a nuclear blast or the second coming. You are entitled to that kind of freedom, privacy, and security. You need it in order to make your journey into the inner world. You also need to be alone. No matter how intimate you may be with another person, it is usually impossible to spill out everything that is hidden in your secret unconscious depths if you have someone else in the room who might wander over and look over your shoulder at what you are writing. If you feel like pacing the room, cursing, talking to some inner figure out loud, pounding on the wall, crying, you should be able to let out your raw feelings and emotions without worrying that someone is watching and listening to you. Just to comment back on that part about setting some time away to actually do this undisturbed. And it made me think of a book that I had to read for a previous job on sales. And it's fascinating how salespeople in that profession will set aside a block of time. They'll put the do not disturb hanger on their door, and they call it the golden hours, where they know that either there's no receptionist or gatekeeper, as they call it, on the phone blocking the executive that they're trying to get to, or when they're out to lunch, or just basically when they have the highest likelihood of making a sale, of getting their end goal. And they will actually close off everything, set off a block of time in their calendar that says busy, do not disturb, all of this, in order to sell something to someone else. And they take it with extreme seriousness, and it's effective. Yet to think of this, and it's telling you how many distractions we have just in our personal life to do something so simple as inner work, spiritual work, something that's going to help you to become more whole, complete, balanced, and emotionally, mentally stable, powerful. And we can't do it. It's very difficult to have this kind of assertiveness for our own benefit, and yet we can do it to sell something to someone, and it's not going to really make us anything more than physical money for a time. It's just very interesting. So you have to be assertive enough to set aside a room and a block of time for yourself. When are you going to become important enough to do this? It's I think it's that transition that makes such a huge difference in where you go in your growth, and it has for me. Sometimes you just got to be alone. You set time aside focused around yourself to do something that's going to change your world. And that's what this is all about, and it's amazing. This is not the first time that this has been said. Same with writing, same with dream work, same with all of these patterns of things. People are telling us in so many ways, so many books, how to do this, and we just have to discipline ourselves in order to execute it. So almost done. Let's go on with the next paragraph. There is also the temptation to start composing the active imagination so that it would sound nice and impressive for the other person if he or she happened to read it. He's still talking about why you should be doing this alone versus with someone else. It has to be clear that only you will ever read these pages. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to be honest in what you record. Now that you have set the stage, found a private place to work, locked the door, and decided how you are going to write or type your active imagination, you are ready to begin. The next chapter is step 1, the invitation. And my battery is about to die, so I think I'm going to continue this in another one. Thank you for joining me. See you for next chapter of Inner Work.